Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a Town of Superior Board of Trustees special meeting for June 30th, 2014. Phyllis, if you'd call the roll.
Mayor Andrew Muffle.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Joe Cirelli. Trustee Zelia Gregoris.
Here.
Chris Hansen.
Here.
Sandy Pennington.
Here.
Lisa Skumans.
Here.
Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Bagley.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry. Town Clerk Phil Sargent here.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee Gregoris. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to the consent agenda. And on the consent agenda this evening is approval of a contract for the purchase of the Shan Shan Chu property at 414 South McCaslin Boulevard. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Williams, second by Trustee Gregoris? Any discussion? Phyllis?
Gregoris.
Yes.
Hansen.
Yes.
Muffle.
Yes.
Pennington.
Yes.
Skumans.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. That brings us to a presentation of Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Advisory Committee recommendations regarding the Superior Town Center civic space parcels. Mr. Bagley.
Thank you, Mayor. Go ahead, Brent. Brent Bickle, the chair for ProStack's going to provide an introduction. I'd just like to say that I know ProStack consultants and staff have been working hard on this, and so tonight we appreciate the work you've done.
Well, thank you, Mr. Magley. Good evening, trustees. Brent Bickle, ProStack chairman. Last October 28th, the town board directed ProStack, the town's Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Advisory Committee, along with town staff, through extensive community outreach, to develop recommendations for the 5 designated civic space areas within Superior Town Center based on the strongest area of consensus among residents. What you're going to see tonight is the result of 8 months of hard work that we had to achieve that goal. An effort which involved extensive community outreach through town media, Engage Superior, booth displays, and 4 public community engagement meetings. The effort spent by the committee was substantial and involved making this process a priority item during every committee meeting that we have held since we were given this task. The result was that at our June 18th meeting, the 6 of our 9 members present voted unanimously to recommend the comprehensive park system plan for the 5 park parcels within this development that you are about to see. Before we get started, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank those who put so much effort into this process. I'd like to thank town staff, and especially Martin Toth, former Parks and Recreation Director and now Assistant Town Manager, and Patrick Hammer, the current Parks and Recreation Director. I'd like to thank Chris Duprinsky of Greenplay, who unfortunately was unable to make it this evening due to the schedule change. But we do have Shannon Weber and Bill Galthelf of Design Concepts, who will be making the presentation. I'd especially like to thank all of the ProStack members who worked so hard to complete this task. These include Aaron Atwell, Peter Bottomley, Jeff Isaacson, Sandy Hammerly, Daryl McCool, Jim Payne, Steve Smith, and Ron Summer. Unfortunately, we have Sandy Hammerly, Peter Bottomley, and Jim Payne with us this evening. And finally, I think the most important thanks and deep gratitude goes to the dozens of citizens that gave up their valuable time to contribute so much to this process so that we could be here tonight and make these recommendations. One final note before I start, we do look at this as a comprehensive park system for all 5 of the town center parcels. So I would encourage the board to permit the presenters to go through all 5 of the parcels before we go back and have discussion. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Shannon Weber and Bill Galthelf of Design Concepts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shannon Weber with Design Concepts. So as Brent mentioned to you guys, we've gone through the process. I'm just going to really quickly, briefly run through what we've done so far, and then I'm going to hand it over to Bill to do the presentation of the actual concepts. But just really quickly, you know, I'm not going to really reiterate what Brent just said. Basically, it's the same as what he just said. The town board had directed ProStack to and the staff to go through and direct us to get the community outreach and develop recommendations for the 5 designated parks at Town Center Superior Town Center, and then from there come up with a consensus among the residents. So that was the overall charge for this project. We went through a process, again, Brent hit on it a little bit, but we started back on December 18th. We had our ProStack meeting kickoff. We had a ProStack meeting January 15th to get committee input. February 6th and 19th, we went through a pretty extensive community engagement meetings, got community collaborative input. February 19th and March 19th, ProStack meetings again, going back and sharing what we had learned through all that public process. In April, we came to you guys, the town board, and reviewed the initial community engagement process and the steps that we took and what we had came up with at that point in time. April 22nd and 23rd, we had 2 more community engagement meetings, going back and presenting to the public what we had learned through the first meetings, the design charrettes, all the input that we had gotten. May 21st, we had a ProStack meeting, review the community input again, begin to formulate our recommendations to the town board. And then, as Brent just mentioned, on June 18th, we presented to the ProStack with our final recommendations for you guys tonight. And then, of course, we're here tonight for the consideration of ProStack recommendations. I'm just going to run through this. I know you guys are all very familiar with it, but just to reiterate and put, I guess, kind of set the stage a little bit again. Again, as Brent mentioned, and we really want to make sure that it's a strong understanding. We're looking at this as an entire park system. So again, we have parcel number 1. Park number 1 is what we call it. Park number 2. Park number 3, 4, and then lastly is 5 down here. The thing to keep in mind as we get into more detail and when we start to really present to you the concepts is that we're looking at these 2 parcels really as one continuous park system, as well as we're looking at 3 and 4, and then of course we'll hit on 5. But again, it's not looking at one parcel each on its own and looking at just the boundary of that park. We really wanted to make sure we took in consideration the creek corridor and all the things that it has to offer in the design process and in the final designs. And again, the overall land use plan, we like to throw this one up here just to remind everybody, again, what's being planned around the parks. Again, we have parcel number 1 up here, 2, 3 down here by the cemetery is always a good landmark, 4 down here, and then of course 5 down in this area here. We also wanted to throw into the mix of things in the presentation the proposed trails that is proposed for out here at Town Center. And the big thing that we really want to make sure everybody recognizes is this US 36 bikeway. It's a really strong, obviously a very strong trail, and a lot of our designs are based on some of the trails that are going on throughout the parks. Not based on those, but we took them into consideration, of course, in the design of each one of the concepts. So again, this is a very, very strong bikeway, the US 36 bikeway, and how it ties into the other trails. Again, this is parcel number 1, parcel number 2, and the connection between those 2 parks along the corridor. Parcel number 3, which is the cemetery, and you can see where there is a multi-use path, that 10-foot multi-use path that you see up here at the other parks, the light blue. It goes through parcel number 3. 4, it's really, the thing with 4 is really keeping in mind the promenade and how that connects to 2 right up in here. So there's a very strong connection, pedestrian promenade there. And then of course that trail system comes all the way out and it hits on 5, which is right here, and comes all the way through. So again, just a reminder that we took a look at that, really wanted to make sure that we took those into consideration in all of our concepts. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bill. He's going to run through the concepts with you guys. And as Brent said, if we can get through all 5 park parcels, that'll help us a ton. And then we'll be more than happy to answer any questions, comments, and that sort of thing.
Bill Guthoff. I'm a landscape architect with Design Concepts. And before I walk you through the plan, just a couple of things. So in this plus or minus 8-month process, we kind of wore 2 hats. So at the beginning of the process, we were trying to be as transparent as possible, just trying to listen be good listeners, listen to public comment, listen to ProStack, listen to what people in the community and thought would fit in these parcels and what they thought future residents would like to see in these parcels. And not until the last, probably maybe the very end of the process did we get in and put on a different hat of trying to bring some of these differing opinions together into plans that would coalesce into sort of a unified system. So we feel that these are very much an expression of what we heard throughout the process, probably more so than an expression of anything that we were trying to impose on any of the parcels themselves. So we're at Part 1 and 2, and just a few key concepts that came to us, and one of the exercises really was trying to feel out what the key elements, what the key ideas are that each of these parcels represented. And one of the big ones, for one, was this gateway. That whether or not this is the main entrance into town center, it is very much a gateway, and this corner is a prominent location that people are going to see all the time, and it's going to lead them further into the development. This is the existing detention pond that is going to remain. And so one of the things we wanted to resolve was, how does this work simultaneously as a gateway, as something really attractive, as a feature that catches your eye and draws you in and makes you want to come into this development and explore it and use these parks, and kind of marry that with the idea that this is a wetland that has different sporadic water levels and things like that, and right now is not maintained as really as an ornamental thing. And so what we thought was that the existing wetland vegetation that's down by the water, the more or less permanent water line is pretty nice, and it's fairly lush. And to bring that up to sort of an edge behind the pedestrian zone here, and kind of mask the lower end with maybe a low wall or some kind of a visual boundary, gives you the impression that there's a nice amenity beyond that, and that the wetlands could be dressed up, and that the outer edge around here becomes something of a promenade. So you have an extra wide walkway leading off both ends of this plaza, of this corner plaza, with stately street trees on both sides of that. To make this corner, give this corner the prominence that it should have. And then visually, this leads you into sort of the real entrance to this park, which would also serve as the park shelter and restroom, but could have an overlook here, another plaza that echoes the corner plaza as you come into the park, that kind of celebrates this revitalized wetland area, and also overlooks the main part of the park. Some of you may be familiar with earlier versions of this and some of the earlier developer plans, where up here there was a high kind of promontory overlooking the wetland, and that was being built up with imported fill in order to support an indoor facility, maybe some kind of a community center or something like that. Since that was not the consensus use that ended up in our final plans, we thought that instead of having two areas, an upper area and a lower area, that divided up the space and made it hard to use either one to its potential, and rather than bring in all that fill, that would be a high cost for a facility that probably doesn't appear to be necessary. We thought, leave this more or less as it is, use whatever fill we can to develop parking along the street side, and we'll come back to the parking later, because the parking here is going to support facilities in Parcel 1 as well as Parcel 2 through this pedestrian link, and is really the only place that we can fit a substantial amount of parking on either of these two parcels. And that gives us a big open space down here to work with. And athletic facilities were one of the big things we kept hearing were in need, large fields and things of that nature. And that gives us the opportunity to have a large field out here, an 8-on-8 soccer. It's not a full-size soccer field, but it's a nice size. It's a large field, and it can also be used. It's big enough for other types of events. Another theme you'll hear a lot is finding multiple purposes for each thing. There was such a long list of things that people wanted for each parcel, they didn't even come close to fitting on all 5 of the parcels. We had lists 10 times as long for each parcel than would possibly fit on any of them. So the idea of multi-purposing areas, so it's not just one use, it's not just a one-liner that can only be used by whoever wins out in the end, but can be used by multiple parties, the same space for different purposes at different times. So this large open grassed field could be used for events. It could be used as passive park space when there's not an activity being on it, and it's ringed by open space. Another balance we were trying to achieve was a balance between park space that's programmed, park space that has equipment that's developed, that has things on it that can be used for one purpose, and just a lot of what we heard also was a need for just open space, that this neighborhood and the town needs open space that just has trails, that just has views, that has activities that you can enjoy without being engaged in an organized event. So around here you'll see the actual boundary of Park 1, and as we went through the process, here's Park 2, it became apparent to us that it was much more informative and much more helpful to not just look at these little parcels in isolation, but as Shannon alluded to look at them in their whole context. So if you look at these two together in the context of Coal Creek, Coal Creek is joining this whole thing, and the Coal Creek Trail through this underpass under the proposed road joins the whole parcel together for pedestrians and cyclists, as well as for motorists. And so it's really possible, and we think it's better to look at these really as one piece and not as two separate parts. And also to think of uses. Not that we're necessarily programming the whole Coal Creek corridor, but as long as it's there and as long as it's helping to support the open space needs of both of these developed parts of the parcels, why not think a little bit about what could go on there that helps fill out what people wanted to do. So we're thinking of a little network of nature trails that can go through here, that can feed off the main trails, the regional trails, that bring you up to the creek, that could have nature play among other activities. It could have seating, it could have some family-oriented activities, it could have places where people want to walk their dogs, things like that. Help dress up the creek corridor itself, make it healthier, as well as provide uses for people, ways for people to enjoy it. Moving on to Park 2. So with our large parking area over here, approximately 80 cars we think could fit in there. A paved section of the Coal Creek Trail links you under the road without crossing the street into Park number 2. And here's a scale for you. Just from here to here is 100 feet, so you can see it's not a long distance. Maybe 300 feet from here to here. Park 2, the overwhelming use we kept hearing for Park 2 was a multi-purpose field, a large multi-purpose field, the largest multi-purpose field that we could possibly fit onto it. So differing ideas as to what a multi-purpose field means, but soccer and rugby were two big ones, and supporting the soccer and rugby, some activities, a playground for the younger kids. If you come to a game and you have little kids who aren't playing, don't want to watch, that there's a place for them to go, that there's a shelter, that there's restrooms. The limited parking access, this is really the only frontage on this parcel where you can get in and access parking. So a small loop where you could have some accessible parking and limited other parking, thus the need for more parking up here if you're going to have a major event without having everybody spill out into the neighborhood. And then this connection that goes down to town center that kind of brings this promenade up, right, opening up onto the park itself, and a continuation of the nature trail and nature play ideas over here. This is a spur of that US 36 regional trail where it crosses over. There's a link to the Coal Creek Trail here, a link, the existing link under US 36 over the Louisville side on the Coal Creek Trail. And covers this one. For now, a few images just illustrating, just some imagery, because the plan is one thing, but what we mean. So gateway, ideas about plaza, about celebrating that space, about marking that corner location and drawing you into the park, about taking a wetland area or a water quality area, and instead of it being an eyesore or weeds, to make that, how do you make that amenity? I mean, water is a scarcity here. So it's a great thing to have available, and so you can do things with it that really celebrate having it there, and tying that idea into this idea, makes it a pretty unique space. And then these walks, all these pedestrian walks through there, and the idea of having the manicured areas, the turf field and things like that, and the mown lawns, and then having a balance with the open space and kind of demarcating those boundaries with a path system that takes you through them. The idea of multi-use, of having a field that you can use as a sports field when you want to, and when you want to have an event there, you could maybe put up a portable stage. You could maybe use the slopes around it for informal seating, like an amphitheater-like space. You could put stones there and boulders there to formalize that, or you could not. You could have events in the park. You could have night events, lighting, and then just the creek play idea, different ways of thinking about that. I mean, we all know and are familiar with Boulder Creek and the types of facilities that are there. Coal Creek is we're smaller in scale, but you can have, and the water isn't quite as abundant in Coal Creek, but you can still use it, and you can still use the theme and have even constructed waterways. You can have a pump that kids pump up the little bit of water's there and make their own little rivulets and pools to play with, and chase things downstream, and harden some of the edges so that you don't have bank destabilization, and people can use it all the time without damaging it, and just really enjoy it. Moving on to parks 3 and 4, and this is more in the heart of the neighborhood, more central, and I think, in fact, in the developer's latest plan, it's called Central Park. The great thing about this space is the hill, I think, or one of the great things about this space. So the cemetery, especially if you've looked at it lately, I mean, it just sits right at the top of this promontory, and there's these fairly steep slopes coming down the side of it. And if you stand down low, like over here, and look up at it, it really has this majesty with this, wrought iron black fence going around it, and just crowning the top of the hill there. And so we really wanted to respect that and also use the space that makes. This is a great space right here, and it's elevated enough so that you have these huge views. Looking this way, you look out across the entire town center development down to Coal Creek. You can see the Coal Creek corridor, and then above that you have these huge views of the Flatirons and Indian Peaks, and it's just a great space. And the slope still comes up above you enough on this side so that it's way overhead, so that you can't see the highway, you can't really hear the highway because there's so much earth between you and the highway that the sound is being deflected way over your head. So it's just an idyllic spot, and I think this is going to be one of those spots in the neighborhood that's really celebrated, where people come for wedding photos, things like that. It's that nice. I mean, really, if you imagine if there were a hill, sort of northeast of Pearl Street, where you could just walk up this hill and overlook part of the Pearl Street Mall and see Boulder Creek Trail and the park in the background with the Flatirons over that. That's the spot. That's the equivalent of this spot for Superior. So down the slope from here, we think is a great place to have that park idea, just the green park, just the open lawn, green park. You could have volleyball down there or not have volleyball. Our suggestion for that is have some sleeves, and you can play volleyball. People can bring poles and a net and play when they don't, and when they want, and when they don't, you have this beautiful open lawn. And down on the corner here, our idea is to have a grove, but a grove that you use. So sort of a more urban, with town center being kind of a more urban introduction to this location, to have a place that reflects that character a little bit. And so if you imagine a plaza, like a European plaza maybe, where you have a tight grove of trees that make this nice canopy overhead, and underneath you might have cafe seating. This is a bocce court, is the idea, some ping pong tables, place for just everybody to gather. So you can come out there, you can play a game, you can watch a game, you can just sit and enjoy the shade. Over here, the shade shelter and the restroom, kind of bridging this over to a court. Down along the street here is flat, easy to grade. It's low enough so that you had it, if you had tennis instead of a basketball court and you had the fence, the tall fence here, you would still be overlooking it up here. It wouldn't ruin your views. You don't have to terrace out the slope and make this look really unnatural, or cut into the side of the cemetery slope. So you preserve all this, keep that down low. The playground here fits nicely between the two, takes the kids away from the street, brings them near this potential slope, which may or may not be good for sledding. We don't know yet, but there's a possibility there. And then the upper end of the playground, where it starts going up the slope, is a nice place for like a boulder scrambling hill. You go up the hill here, and then you could take an embankment slide back into the playground. So kind of an uphill extension of the playground instead of just having a flat playground. One thing I missed up here at the cemetery, where you have this regional trail coming through here and making this connection and connecting back into the neighborhood, and of course into the park, just to demarcate the cemetery itself, and to respect that, and to have just a little opening here, maybe screen it with some trees, a low stone bench, something like that, just to mark this as the entrance, because I think this is a significant spot for the town, and I think developing around it will make it even more prominent. Down on Park 4, kind of an extension of these ideas. This is another one where it's hard to look at these completely separately because they're only a block apart. So you wouldn't really want to duplicate activities too much that are happening here in either park. But we ended up looking at this at Park 4 a lot, as the developer's been calling it a village green. We're kind of seeing it as like a communal backyard, as like a place where people from these houses and maybe these houses and these houses, or townhouses, apartments around here, can sort of get together informally. And if you have a block party thing, or you have 4 or 5 families and they get together, you could come out and use this and have a meal in this pavilion, and have these counters. We're calling sort of like almost like you could put outdoor portable bar stools around here or something like that, and just kind of sit around, bring portable grills, and hang out here and have a little, part of this ellipse is just open lawn here, and we're seeing the rest of it just kind of as ringed in by street trees on the outside, and then a low hedge, some ornamental plantings around here just to buffer you a little bit from the street, and a little marker on each corner just to bring in this plaza idea. And the other big use that we see is just visual for this park. That as people go by, as the road splits and they come up down here and go around it, and come here and go around it, that probably the biggest use of this park is going to be by people driving by and looking at it and wanting to see something that's just visually pleasing. And just some of the visual references or inspiration that we were thinking of here. I mean, here's that grove idea where you have seating along the grove with a nice canopy overhead, where different types of activities can take place. The bocce idea in the grove, outdoor, little sports like that in the grove that are separate from the larger fields. The idea of bringing that slope, of making that slope, resemble something bigger and more majestic that kids can imagine as they run up through it and scramble over it and then slide down. How do you make this into a playground? Bringing boulders and things like that in. The counter idea that goes into Park 4, along with the pavilion. And then lastly, on Park 5, You know, we had a lot of problems with this one. It's a small site, and we were struggling with what types of courts or things like that would fit here. The access was always a little bit ambiguous. And then when we actually went out and looked at it and understood better what was going on here, we would recommend that at this time, this is kind of a placeholder space, that it's really not, we don't feel it's appropriate to bring people here for public activities for a few reasons. There's a detention pond here that's going to remain, that's created by this earthen dam that goes across here that we don't really know anything much about, but this is going to be taking more water probably, may or may not be enlarged. But the proposed park site would be right in the, right below, at the bottom of the dam, essentially. You know, if there's a spill, there's not a spillway, but if this were to spill over, or if the dam were to give way, this would be where everything would land. So we think there's a potential safety issue. It's so close to US 36, we can almost imagine that when this is widened and you have 3 or 4 snowplows abreast going up here throwing snow, that's going to just right into whatever you have down here. It's in a low point, bounded by slopes on all sides. So how do you drain it? How do you maintain it? So for those reasons, and also if you go south of here, there's much more open space, there's much more usable space, and this almost seems like, even though it's not right now legally, it almost seems like more an appendage of what's going on to the south of it, because to this side it's really blocked off by the detention pond and the lack of necessarily a road that's even going in past it at this point. So that's just a quick summary of those. There were further discussion items that are not that we haven't resolved that we wanted to bring to your attention and just talk about the issues that we discussed. A big one on part 2 was if we have a field out there, is it sod? Is it synthetic turf? There's also another option that's hybrid turf, which is a combination of both of these. And is it a lit field or is it not a lit field? Dog facilities, we're not really showing any. Where do they go? Is it a dog park? Are they smaller, more urban dog gardens that are interspersed in the neighborhood? Are they portions of open space or open space trails that are fenced and gated so they could be used off leash? And then if there's going to be a pool, is there going to be a pool in this development? Is it an indoor pool, an outdoor pool, and where does it go in this development? And we don't have answers to these. We have some visual references. You know, some of the issues we talked about with synthetic turf are that part 2 is in a floodplain. If Coal Creek floods again, or when Coal Creek floods again, synthetic turf will not fare well in floodwaters, and you'd be likely to lose most or all of your investment in that. Natural turf is nicer to walk on and to recreate on like this casually, but it's not as nice to play on, and it doesn't have as long a season for playing. A new option that Lakewood is trying out right now, it's been used a lot in Europe, but hasn't been used here much yet, is a synthetic turf where you actually can roll it out like sod, so it has the synthetic fibers in it, but then you put this growth medium in it, you backfill it, seed it, and it actually grows natural turf as well, so you can play it all the time without wearing it down, but it's less expensive than this, and it's not as hot and doesn't have the rubber crumb infill that makes this really hot to be on if you're not playing. Well, if you are playing, but so remains to be seen whether this is a good solution for Colorado yet, but it looks promising. Just a few words on the lighting. It looks like for a field of the size that we're talking about, I mean, the typical configuration would be 4 or 6 poles. Probably 6 poles would be more appropriate because we don't have a lot of room to place them further away from the field like you would have to with just 4 to get more spread for the light. They'd be a minimum of 50 feet tall, probably higher, probably closer to 70. This setback from the edge of the field to the light pole would be most likely around 30 feet or more, probably not much less than that. So some issues there, but so the main concern would be the residents right along here. How does that work with these residents here? The dog park idea. In Park 3, the developer had an idea for a dog park on kind of the west slope of the cemetery or behind the ice facility. I mean, that looks like too steep of a slope to us, and it doesn't have great road access. And for those reasons, we don't think that's a great location for a dog park, but we definitely support the idea. And so, just an illustration, you know, if there's not room for a big traditional dog, maybe there is room, maybe there's another place to put it. But one idea, this needs to be big enough to support, you know, grass or whatever other surfacing you're going to put out here for the number of dogs you think you're going to get. If it's a little harder, you know, not trying to maintain grass, it can be more compact, of course. And then, you know, one unexplored option is there's some open space in the creek corridor where this kind of idea might work well. Instead of a more formalized dog park, that some of the trails or maybe additional trails that aren't, of course, part of a regional trail system where people don't want to be opening and closing gates, could support this type of idea. And you can take questions or.
Okay, thanks. Anything else from that you want to do in terms of presentation or whatnot? Otherwise, any comments? Otherwise, I'll ask for questions from the board and then take public comment. Okay. Seeing that there's nothing, then any questions or comments from the board? Trustee Gregouris.
Just a couple of comments. The hybrid turf looks like a great idea. When will you know from Lakewood if it's working here in Colorado or not?
Lakewood's field is set to open in August, and they seem pretty confident about it because they put out a sole source bid that is the only thing that they wanted. It's for Lakewood Memorial Park. And it's a big, heavily used field. And so it should be in construction, I think, imminently, if not now.
Be curious to see how they do through the winter and how it pans out.
I think, Ely, I think that's what Mile High Stadium is, that same type of turf.
Mile High does it?
Yeah, it's a hybrid, pretty sure.
Also, what's the size of the parcel 4, the one that's on the promenade kind of, do you know what the size of that is?
You know, I don't remember the acreage off the top of my head, but I can sort of scale it out for you. Oh, you have it? 0.68? 0.64. Okay. Just, here's a scale for reference. So there's 100 feet.
So fairly small, but large enough to have a family reunion or, you know, 3 or 4 families getting together maybe.
Yeah, so 100 by 200 is like a half city block, something like that.
And then, as far as parcels 1 and 2 are concerned, I really love the flow. The way that you put those two together is beautiful. I like it a lot.
Thanks. That was kind of a
It was
breakthrough
very
for
nice.
us when we started looking at them together. It solved a lot of
Yeah,
problems.
those two parcels, it just, I like how you have the parking on the one side. It's a short walk to go to parcel 2. I like how the Cold Creek corridor is kind of connected. So, thumbs up on both of those is great.
Thanks.
Trustee Williams.
So can we start with area 1 and 2, parcels 1 and 2? So first of all, I mean, I have a number of questions here, just on your designs and ideas. I do love what you have going here. I also like what the developer has as well, and I think there's some possibility that we could marry some of those together. First of all, on parcel 1, I think that is on the left, the parking lot. Is there any way that we could hide that? Actually, maybe put that here instead of being on the street, so that when you're driving through here, your experience is not just a bunch of concrete.
Yeah, it would be hard to fit it over here in terms of, so one thing we're trying to do is get a good flow, just in terms of traffic. So this, if you imagine this kind of dropping, this road kind of dropping slightly, I think as you get between McCaslin and what's going to be a bridge over Cold Creek over here. we think in terms of constructability, I guess, and driving, that in order to be able to enter here, have a two-way road all the way through the parking and be able to come out at another spot so you don't have any dead ends or bottlenecks or things like that is good for the flow that we couldn't do coming out this way. In terms of using the fill off, like where all of this is fill essentially. None of the embankment for this roadway currently exists. So in terms of economy, we feel like to build up this section here kind of fits together. This is already up high, and so this whole piece right here is this upper thing. So I guess what we're looking for is these filtered views. That if we do a double row of trees here, continuing that idea here, and then we have more planting on the inside of the parking lot, and then we break up. We don't have one huge expansive parking, but we break that up with plantings along the parking, so that it's not just one sea of parking, and it's just double banked. It's not a big parking lot. We feel like you'll be able to see through this. So we see that like the edge can be a nice pedestrian corridor, giving this enough room for a wide sidewalk with a wide tree lawn on both sides of it before you get to the parking. And then kind of these views, these filtered views down into this green basin down here. We feel like it could be a nice experience looking through that it won't just look like a giant, commercial parking lot or something like that.
So you've seen Purple Park and how that fronts on both sides basically is all greenery.
Yeah.
And there's no parking right there.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering if that was something that we could achieve here.
Yeah, it's just hard to make this double connection anyplace else along here. When we had this upper terrace idea that supported the indoor facility, we were looking at kind of doing a loop or a larger loop like this, or a little horseshoe coming through there. And that really concentrated the parking around the building. Like the building was this island between this big road and this big parking lot all around it. And we didn't feel like that worked very well. And that was one of the reasons we went in this direction, was to make a larger open space. And if we could, I'd love to hide more of the parking.
Okay, so that's one thought here. I like the fact that we have two multi-use fields, one on each property, so I think that's great that we were able to utilize that. What I am wondering, the amphitheater component, we're not doing that here, and I'm wondering why.
It's a little, so this slope, this little hatch here coming down from the parking to this lower area, this is all floodplain down here. I think I should have concentrated on that a little more. So as this gets built up, this stays down in the Coal Creek floodplain down here, more or less at the elevation that it's at now, but graded out so that it's a nice field. So this hatched area between here and there represents a slope, and we think it's probably, 7 or 8 feet vertical change probably. So it's not, I have trouble with calling it an amphitheater because that suggests something much grander than that. Mm-hmm. But those slides that had the little, like a little grass slope that you could have some informal seating on, I think it supports that type of an idea. And we can call that an amphitheater. It's just
it's not a built-in one.
It's like a little amphitheater. And then, so down here, this down here I should also touch on is a water quality area, and that's proposed. The developer had a water quality, a larger, not round, but rounder, more concentrated water quality area here. And we thought, to capture the runoff from this parking lot, also this has an open ditch that's running across here now. And whatever else is running off from the field in these walks here, that we would kind of string out this water quality area and use it as a buffer for Coal Creek, so you kind of separate these two uses. So you have the Coal Creek corridor buffered from the field and event space by this water quality, and that's another one of those ideas where the wetland, where you have a wet area, but instead of leaving it as an afterthought, to make it something that's really an amenity, and that's not just a buffer, but something that that it's a garden as well, that it's enjoyable. Is what this is.
So if I can elaborate a little
Sure.
bit on the amphitheater, what we wanted to do, and we have it labeled there right there, is more of a portable stage, and we showed you on the image. If you're familiar with Hideaway Park and Winter Park, that's a prime example. So the whole idea is that a portable stage can come down in there, and really that space becomes multi-use. You can use it for whatever athletic, activities there may be. It could be very passive activities, throwing the frisbee or whatever. But then also when you do want to have an activity, you can bring down a portable stage and use that corner, that curved area as your seating area, like Bill was trying to describe. But then that stage can sit in there, and you can move it in and out. That was the idea, so that we can use that space for a whole lot of different ideas. We did the design for Hideaway Park up at Winter Park, and that's exactly what they needed to see. They needed to have that field for lots of different uses, but when they wanted to do their concerts in the park, they brought in that portable stage. And
Can you call up a picture of that?
yeah, that's the one. Go. That's this one right here. So that's the portable stage they pull in right now at Winter Park, Hideaway Park. So, and a lot of different, I was up in Meeker. They do the same exact thing. They bring in a portable stage on their fields and use it that way, and then they can pull it. That way you don't have something that's permanent and always there, but you can move it back and forth. So that was the idea, a little bit, just to elaborate on the idea and the concept. Sorry, Bill.
And then can we go back to parcel 1 and 2? I'm wondering, is there any way, or did we think about incorporating community gardens?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot, and we didn't, certainly, we don't have a proposed location for it. We sort of had mixed feedback as to interest or not interest. Should it be large? Should it be small?
Okay. And then what also, maybe an arboretum? Have you thought about that as well? Much like Louisville has near Lafayette or the Louisville Rec Center?
We didn't talk about it, but yeah, I think there are enough planting opportunities in a lot of these spaces.
Like a formal one,
certainly
yeah.
we can formalize it.
Okay, so those are some thoughts. And then as far as the sizes of these multi-use fields, I've got the small one at 165 times 300 length. The other one is 210 by 400. What can be played on those?
So this size is, we call it 8-on-8 soccer. It's like, I think U9, U10 soccer, youth soccer. This is large enough that full-size soccer is variable. So this is within the range of a full-size soccer field. The run out, in order to squeeze that large of a field onto this parcel, you can see that it's tight. Normally, we would try to have 10 yards of just green run-out space on all sides of the field. We can't fit that here and have the size field that we want. A compromise that we came up with that we think could work pretty well is these crusher fines paths around it are 10 feet wide, so we feel like that gives you kind of a warning track. So if you step off the field, that you're on crusher fines and you're not on field anymore, and you have time to stop running before you hit something. Or you could stripe the field, 30 feet or 10 feet or whatever seems appropriate within these boundaries and have a smaller field.
Okay.
Because it's huge.
And my kids don't play soccer, they play volleyball. So could you give me an idea of the size of this compared to a football stadium? That's the only thing I can think of in my mind. Oh, I know how big that is.
Yeah, so for 100 yards, we'd be cutting, 100 feet off the end of this.
And so it's a little larger than a football stadium?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that really helps.
Yeah, particularly longer in this case, yeah.
Okay. And then also, what is the buffer that we have on the creek, the open space buffer that we have on both sides of the creek?
So what this green is showing is more or less where the existing, mostly cottonwoods, a little bit of willow and stuff like that are out there now.
And then also, not just what's on
so
it,
the
but
proposed?
What is the feet that we're talking about?
The width of this?
Yes, the width, thank you.
So, taking our 100-foot yardstick here, it varies considerably. So
Do we have I'm sorry, just a break, do we have a pointer we could provide?
Well, they've been using the cursor.
Yeah, this will work
Okay.
too.
Okay, either way, yeah, just so it can be closer to the mic.
So for this 100 feet right here, I mean, right here between the edge of parcel 2 and the existing Cold Creek corridor is just 100 feet right there. But of course, this, you know, it all kind of snakes around there. So in some places, we're fairly close to the creek.
Like, how close?
You know, these trees here are probably 20, 30 feet wide
Okay.
from the creek, and there's different strands of the actual creek too, of the flow. But, you know, anywhere from 20 or 30 to 100 feet, probably.
Okay.
little
And so
bit.
that parking lot is probably the closest?
The parking lot is the closest, and we certainly wouldn't want to drain it in this direction. You know, we'd want to capture that water, drain it either to the center and treat it, you know, have water quality over here or something like that, and not dump it into the creek right there.
Okay.
We'd have to protect it.
All right. Great.
Yeah.
Thinking about that. Shall we go to Parks 3 and 4 now? Thank you. So on this, there is a portion that we didn't use. So it's to the left of the basketball or tennis court. Is there a specific reason why we didn't use that?
Well,
is there something I'm missing here?
I mean, we have ideas for this, but it's not, so what the developer is proposing for this park parcel ends right here.
Okay, all right.
So on
It's
his
changed,
part,
there's so many
yeah,
iterations that.
yeah. On earlier versions, we were using this.
Okay.
And we'd love to use it. We have ideas for it, but right now he's showing a parking lot right here.
Alrighty. And then this grass court, you're saying sleeves for volleyball. You know, I know volleyball, but I don't know what you're talking about with sleeves.
Oh,
That you put the thing into.
so yeah.
Oh, okay.
So they're preset.
Okay.
Pockets if you brought poles. So if you're, I mean, there's multiple ways to go with this volleyball court. And we were debating, do we make it a paved court? Do we make it a sand court? Do we make it a grass court? And so not knowing what would be the preference, we sort of went with the least you need to develop a volleyball court, and you could make it more developed or better from there. So if you just had these sleeves in a flat grass court, so you could bring poles and a net and set them up right there.
So if you don't want to play volleyball, is that in your way when you're running around playing or anything like that?
No, you just
Oh.
put a cap on it, and it's just that grade. It would be kind of like a sprinkler head.
So this would just be more open space that residents can come to and flag kite or whatever they want to do?
And that's why we thought this supported the multi-purpose idea more than a paved court or a sand court, although the sand court could be used for multiple purposes too.
And so as far as the dog park, where would you recommend putting a dog park? If it's not on that parcel, is it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know specifically, but in terms of like the open space, this seems like a promising, maybe underutilized area back here. It's not on any of the proposed parcels, but it's outside of, so this is a row of houses here. So you could buffer it from the houses, have it along the Cold Creek corridor, and it's a large enough area. You could, if you wanted to have, well, I mean, it should have parking if it's a formal dog park, but you could probably do something like this, maybe a little bit smaller on that side to have access to it. So it seems promising that you could have just a trail, just a real simple, informal dog park there. Other than that, I mean, we feel like people will use, of course, all of these places for their dogs, whether they're designated or not. But to have a dedicated one, we didn't see a good location in 3 or 4 where you could develop a dog park the way we feel like it should be developed without taking away a core use that people really want, maybe more than a dog park.
All right, that's all my questions.
Thanks. Other questions? Trustee Bennington, anything?
Yeah, I'll go next. Okay, so let's go back to Park 1. It is very hard for me to imagine dressing up a detention pond. So I'm all ears when I hear you say that. Apparently, you've got some vision that even would be great to have a viewing station. So I'm excited about that, and I'm going to just wait and see, because I trust you. You do good work. I actually, once again, I really do like the amphitheater-esque type seating. It doesn't have to be all that formal, but the vision I have, and I know the developer has seen this and several other people have seen it, is that Pacific Coast Park right at Laguna Beach, where it's got a gradual, and it actually has a solid bank of rock that has flat edges that demarcates it. And to me, having something like that of some seriousness would be beautiful to mark some of that off. Not every square inch would need to be marked such, but I can see, I'm visualizing where you have the stage and how that curve is there, and if enough of that is done, more so than in the visual you showed of the one reference.
Yeah.
More than that.
Yeah, more formal. a more
But it
formal
doesn't
approach.
have to be like totally expensive either. Then on the water quality thing, is that where you're showing where the kids can actually sort of walk into the water and play in the water?
I mean, we're thinking along Cold Creek would be nicer than that.
Okay.
To actually get them to the creek, like
Okay.
further up the creek in Lafayette, I think a couple places, they're kind of built stone steps and seating and things like that that take you down to the creek that are pretty nice.
Right. What happens in the blue length there?
I mean, we're thinking, so this is an example of a water quality pond that's been made into into an amenity in here. So you could have, so it can be ornamental. Maybe not the water so much, but the plants.
Maybe pastoral, just pretty to sit and read a book around that kind of thing?
Good habitat and.
Okay. Okay, I see that. So showing those two again, just for the board's consideration. Way back, I think when we were looking at the Oz plan, and I know we revisited it in the PD approval process, because these are so linked, which I totally agree with, how we do that underneath the bridge
Oh, yeah.
is really, really critical. It's got to be done beautifully to have that visual connection. So I just throw that out there. I'm not sure I'm real keen on the placement of that playground. I'll reserve judgment on it, but to me, that's such a prime piece of Coal Creek corridor right there. It's beautiful, and frankly, it's what's visible from the most used side of Superior Town Center. And to have that playground right there as a visual obstruction, if you will, before I see the creek, I'm questioning a little bit. I want to see nature. I don't want to see plastic playground equipment. So wanted to bring that forth. I would really have to be convinced on what this hybrid turf does. I didn't quite understand your description. Does it feel like grass?
It
Or
has
does it
natural
feel like
grass in
turf?
it. So it has synthetic fibers, so that are always there.
Right.
And then natural grass also grows up through it. So,
And when a flood hits, what happens to it?
well, it's still going to silt in, but the difference between flooding that, I think, and flooding traditional synthetic turf field is that the synthetic turf has, a deep layer of just that rubber crumb, and once that gets silted in, it's you can't vacuum it, you can't really clean it, you have to remove it.
So what, is it does it perform well in a flooded situation?
I don't think it will do well in a flood either, but I think there's less damage, there's less costly damage.
Well, I
guess,
think
than synthetic.
the board would need more information on that, because
Yeah.
this is a huge field. It's a third longer than a football field.
Yeah.
And it's a huge field. And so before we went into it, we'd have to know the cost of installation and the projected cost of repair. Can it be repaired, or if it flooded, would it have to be totally replaced? So more information on that. I am not a fan of crusher fine boundaries. I think this is such a capstone for this community, that those edges around the field need to be sharp, and I would love to see them concrete to make them very definitive. If you go over to Founders Park and you see how the grass has grown into the crusher fines, and they're not sharp and they're not clean, I'm not a fan of crusher fines in this environment. To me, this has got to look spectacular all the time. So I think this is a case where we would be wise to spend more money on concrete. Where do spectators sit around field number 2?
Well, there's not a lot of room around field number 2. I mean, you have this 10-foot trail, which would probably be where most of them would be. I think along the Coal Creek side, you have an opportunity to get back a little bit further and get some shaded seating, kind of informally back along here. I think along the playground, you could get some benches and things like that. And on this side, where you have the shelter and this little plaza, it's not, it's probably not the perspective that you want on the game, but you could have some seating there. But really, it's pretty limited. I mean, in terms of getting bleachers in, you'd be taking something else out. And I think on this side, you couldn't really get bleachers in on this side without making the field significantly smaller.
Right. So I think Elia's suggestion, if we remove that playground, what level of nice-looking bleacher-type seating would fit there?
Well, a lot of bleachers would take up less space than that playground.
Okay. Okay. And
You're okay with seeing bleachers instead of plastic?
no, I'm not. But it was just whispered in my ear. I fear the field has been maxed out, and I wouldn't max it out. I would actually pull it in to a reasonable length. To me, visually, a professional football field is 300 feet, right? So if we max this out at 300 feet, save the extra 100 feet, and worked with seating, and put seating in, I think we've maxed out this field. I mean, way too much. And I'd like to see some reasonable size field with seating, because I've been to too many of these places, and when there's not enough seating, the enjoyment goes way down. It seems sort of poorly planned, et cetera. So, perhaps there are some ways to fiddle with that, but seating to me is sort of important. And if there's a nice way to do bleachers, that they're not a visual eyesore, let's consider where to put those. Let me see if there's anything. Can the portable stage be moved here as well? Let's say we have a bigger event that we really want to have on the town center side. It can? Okay, good. On hybrid turf, if we have it, can dogs run on it? Can dogs urinate on it? Can it still be, throw the frisbee to your dog, that kind of thing? Or is it going to be, are we going to have to be worried about that type of thing?
Well, it drains and it can be cleaned. I don't think, it would be recommended for use in a dog park, but,
No, I meant just if a dog happens to...
I think it would be just easier to clean. A lot of synthetic turf fields are fenced and restricted only to athletic uses for that and other reasons, because they're difficult to clean, and you don't want that to happen. I think the hybrid would be a little bit more forgiving.
Let's see. And we're talking grass for Field 1, correct?
Yeah, this is also floodplain, and we're also thinking of it as a probably less formal.
And then I don't know that you'll know the question to this, but I know there are ways that other communities have actually increased water flow to always keep a certain level of water in the creek. I just throw that out to anybody who might know, can that be done in Coal Creek to keep some water there all the time, rather than sometimes it goes down to nothing? Does anybody know?
I don't have an answer.
So I'd like to investigate that, because I do think this is going to become a beautiful, beautiful resource, and I'd like to see some water in it at all points. Okay, I think that's enough. I think the 80 parking up there is nice. I actually see that working quite nice. I'm a little concerned about just that drop-off area down there being so close to the water, et cetera, but again, and I love the connection to the promenade that you put in. I think that's very nice. Okay, so if we can go to Park 3. So you told Deborah you would like to put some more amenities in that bare spot. What would you put in there? What would your first choices be?
Well, I think we had more call for courts than we're showing here. Right now, we're showing basketball or tennis. I mean, the first thing I would probably suggest is both.
And describe to me a little bit, in the public process, bocce. How popular is bocce?
It was brought up and people liked it. It was partly that, and it was partly this sort of general use thing, something that fits well in that space. That it's as much a spectator as a player sport in a way. Right.
I do really like those tree-tabled European-esque things. When I happen to go to them, I sit in them, and it's fun just to see the life and the activity and combination of people reading books, sitting, enjoying, and then some sort of low-impact sports. But wear and tear on those ping pong tables, which I think would be sort of fun for teenagers as well, how do they age over time?
Well, these would, they're outdoor ones. I mean, these are not wood or plywood or anything like that. So they come in either concrete or stainless steel or materials that are designed
kids are not going to break them apart.
To be outside and to be, to withstand those types of conditions.
I happen to love the formality in parcel 4. I like the balance and the harmony, because I do think largely it serves a huge purpose to be pretty when you drive around it and to be symmetrical while also serving a function. So I like that about 4. I'm not really interested in another dog park in town center, but I am interested in an assortment of dog gardens.
Yeah.
So I would like at some point to hear, given the whole plan, not just the park parcels, the whole plan, if you could put in, let's say, 5 dog gardens, where would they be? Mm-hmm. So that's just a future thing. And then lighting. I think we've got to be very careful with lighting if we want to sell those properties on the other side of the lighting. So I think that needs more discussion. That's all.
Thank you. Trustee Skumatz.
So I appreciate the great planning that's gone into all of this, but my overall perception is that it takes care of people who want fields, but it doesn't do much for a lot of other kinds of things. One of the things I think it does is it seems to me that the creek walk, which I know was a really important part of your early comments back when, the creek seems very crowded, and I'm having a hard time envisioning how much space there is sort of to walk along the creek or to enjoy the creek, and it seems to me like it's pushed to accommodate one field that's just way too big, I think, and it seems to me a football field size should be the maximum, and so that troubles me. It's not that the creek seems almost an afterthought, sort of shoved to accommodate fields. I would be against any kind of artificial turf on either of those places, because I think if they're flood areas, and I'm not crazy about having more artificial turf in a flood area, either artificial or the hybrid. They both seem like it's it's asking for trouble. I really don't like how big that one field is in particular, because I think the Williams Field, is too big for its space too, and it strikes me that way every single time I look at it. And that's, I'm sure, what would happen to this one. That's the way it would appeal to me, it seemed to me as well. I would prefer not having two fields. I think it takes a lot of fields. We've got fields around town, and that just seems like too many fields to me. I think we don't have enough variety for teens. Basketball and tennis aren't enough. Community gardens, climbing wall. I guess pool didn't show up high enough on the list. I like the chess tables. That's the way I think of them. Okay, and bocce seems silly, but maybe that's because I've never seen anybody in the U.S. really use a bocce court, except maybe in an Italian district in some inner city or something. I don't know. I've never really seen people play that. I have a little bit of difference of opinion than Trustee Pennington, because I would rather see things a little bit more informal. I'm happy with the formality of that one in the middle of the block, but I prefer crusher fines. I don't like to see things that seem overly planned and you shall use this way and that sort of thing. I don't like that, and so I prefer the crusher fines, the flexibility, and that sort of thing. I don't want things to look really planned. I think the cemetery is far too crowded again, and you've got a cemetery and then you've got stuff right next to it, and that doesn't seem to me a good flow either. Let's see. Other comments. How many? I can't remember the other comments right now, so that'll have to do for now.
Trustee Hansen.
Overall, I think the plan is really good, so nice job. On Field 2, or Parcel 2, I actually would remove the crusher fine totally and just put grass there instead, because I don't think you want to have crusher fine as part of your runoff. In soccer, if you're doing slide tackling and so forth, you don't want to slide across the crusher fine. So I would eliminate this and this, perhaps maybe take it around the back of there. And then you'd increase the size of the field there, the usable space of the field. I certainly wouldn't make the field smaller to accommodate bleachers, because then you would defeat the purpose of having the field there. If you want to accommodate more fans, but at the expense of the field, they're not going to come to it because they can't use it for what they want to use it for. So I would actually eliminate the crusher fine. And if you want to put maybe a little strip of concrete to clean it up around the edges, I think that would be fine. As far as the type of material, I think that would be a good conversation at a future time. Synthetic turfs have changed a lot since we've put in Williams Field, and I think everybody would be really surprised on what you would get. Including, you don't necessarily have to use that rubber material anymore. They have ground coconut shells that you can use instead. And I believe that even in a floodplain, you can use those types of field without damaging the field too much if it did flood. So I think it would be worthy of having somebody come in who is expert in synthetic fields to give us a presentation on what's out there now. As far as lights go, I would love to see lights there, because then it's usable at more hours of the day or at night. You get more use out of it. At one point we were discussing having a pub or a bar that overlooked the fields. Where is that, and where do the houses start, or the residents start?
So in this strip over here, this is mostly houses on both sides, and I think it was on the west side of the promenade that bar was going to be. So right on this corner here, probably. That's my guess.
Okay. In comparison to Williams Field with the lights down there, I don't believe that that's a problem at all with having the lights on that field. In fact, the trails around the fields and the proximity to the creek there, as far as I know, haven't been an issue. So again, I wouldn't reduce the size of that playing surface, because the goal is to bring people in from outside of the town to spend time in the town and then spend money in the town. If we make it too small and make it not what it's supposed to do, then really it's just going to be residents going down there, not people coming in, and again, it defeats the purpose of what that field is for. And then the last comment, the other trustees said it was bocce ball. I didn't hear a lot of bocce ball. I've played it once. I'm not sure how many people in Superior play it, but I'm wondering if there might be a better use of that space for something else. And that's it. Thank you.
So I'll reserve my comments for a little bit later on in an effort to get public comment, but the things that I think we need to be clear what this plan is, and first of all, I want to thank you and ProStack members for all the hard work and the community involvement. But there's always this, when you have a limited resource, and this is a limited resource, you always have pros and cons and winners and losers. So in this design, it appears that there's more outdoor space, and I don't believe that there's any indoor space provided at all. So we would just have to acknowledge that by being interested in this plan, we don't want any indoor space in the town center, short of what's being on the town square, because there'd be no place to do anything like that. And maybe that's good and maybe that's bad. There's always a push and pull between what's just unprogrammed open space and what's more programmed, and to be clear, tennis courts, basketball courts, those types of things. And there's a push and pull between what's in it for adults and what's in it for kids. And at least my first blush on this is that this is really geared toward children with limited opportunities for adults. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, I don't know, but that's what this plan essentially entails here. In terms of the dog park, I know that Trustee Pennington said we can wait for a little bit, but actually I think we need to pretty much nail that down tonight, because that's what's going to be coming before us on the 14th, so we need to identify where those spots would actually be. Maybe we don't want a dog park. I think for this type of development, we really need to have some off-leash area, but that's just my personal opinion. In terms of parking, I'm hoping that a lot of it could be eliminated because we'd be close enough to structured parking down the road, and that's part of the reason that we have structured parking. So just a thought. So, and I guess just weighing in on the bocce ball, I don't think anybody plays in Superior. I don't think that we might have somebody play it, twice a year, perhaps. And the ping pong table, I think we have one in Founders Park that I think I've seen some skateboarders on, but I don't think anybody's playing ping pong. So just food for thought. So with that, I'd like to entertain any public comment. Any public comment?
Oh, yeah.
If you wouldn't, so yeah, for this, if you wouldn't mind coming for the mic and just let us know who you are.
I'm Drew Scheifel. Do you need address as well, I heard?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Personally, I'd like to see more tennis courts. I think we have barely enough to cover the existing Superior residents right now. If we expand, it's a lot more housing. If we do that, I don't see many residents driving down McCaslin to reach these courts, but if we oversaturate the ones we have right now, it's just not going to be that great. So.
Great. Thank you very much.
Hi, Patricia Dunham, but I'm here representing Open Space Committee tonight. Just a couple of things that I want to reiterate from our recommendations in May and in June that we made to the board. From May was we've asked for the environmental impact studies on the creek area. I mean, I think these designs are nice and things like that, but I don't think that that's really been addressed. So we don't know that all of these things can fit around the creek, and we need to have those studies done, I think, before we plan on programming around that, because that is one of the assets that we do want to protect in the town. For parcel 3, the other thing that we recommended in our June is that that slope is really looked at from an engineering perspective, the slope that goes up to the cemetery, and that I think goes at one point down to a retention pond. So if it does the impact there of changing that slope or things that we put down, will that survive any major weather issues or things like that as we do the design? So we would recommend again or reiterate that the board take those two recommendations into consideration from our advisory committee while they consider these plans and before they make any final decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dana D'Souza, 1752 Eldorado Drive. I agree with some of the comments about less programming along the creek. I think the playground, since you have a playground within a couple of blocks over here in Park 3, as well as the one that's Founders Park as well, I think that's pretty close enough that you don't need to have one right along the edge of the creek where you are going to have much more impact, and from an open space standpoint as well, you're going to have much more activity right along there. I do like the idea of not having any border on the largest field, Park 2, as well, because I think it works well in a lot of places. There's a couple of places in northern part of Boulder, in North Boulder, where they have just fields. People seem to manage to find places to sit just fine all around there. So I don't really think that we need to have something completely defined, and it also help keep the beauty of the creek a little less developed, and I think that's something that we should look towards. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment regarding this? Anybody? I'd love to have maybe a response from the developer, what his thoughts might be about the presentation or the ideas for the town center.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. Randy Goodson with RC Superior. First of all, it's amazing the amount of work that has gone into all these parks and the community members who have been involved, the number of meetings that have been held. I know Pam Lehman from my team has attended, I think, all those meetings. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on these plans. I think there's a lot of really great, a lot of really neat and good planning that's taken place. With anything, when you have, the more information that you have on the site conditions and the infrastructure and the grading, it changes how you might look at things. And our team has evaluated these plans. As it relates to just Park 1 and 2, that's purely within the town's purview, and we don't have a vote or a say. But I'd like to just share a few observations from my team in that regard. Just starting off in the north, this is a detention pond. I know it says wetland, and I think that's just an indication that it's wet sometimes, but it's not a wetland. This overlook, someone would just generally be using it during storms or the day or two after storms. If you wanted this pond to be full time, I don't have a solution for the creek, but I know the town is looking for places for recycled water storage. This is too low to accommodate the recycled water system, because the pond up at in the Discovery Office Park that was just approved, that's a much better location with the elevation. But you could pump water in and pump water out, I believe, to maintain an elevation, to have a water feature. In the alternative, you could consider, just to address some of the board's comments, you could consider removing this overlook and extending out this berm and picking up more of an area for an amphitheater. As it relates to the water runoff, we did locate the water quality pond over here, and that provided the opportunity to sort of rotate the field on its axis a little bit and slightly increase the dimension of the field so that it could accommodate more players and whatnot and have more multiple uses. Down here, I presume that that your consultants were concerned. I think I heard them say they were concerned about having a dog park too close to the homes here. We would really support dog parks or dog gardens, whatever off-leashed area, however you want to refer to them. I would support having these off-leashed areas in every park, and just providing a lot of those areas. So if somebody's going to go play, go put their dogs in, something like that. So I think this is right here is a great opportunity to have a dog park and a community garden in both locations here, or throughout this area here. I think it would be very constructive. And then moving over to part two, we previously expressed concern, and my civil engineer reiterated that this turnaround and access wouldn't work from a grading perspective. I think there's an opportunity in this area, this western portion of Part 2, if you eliminate this turnaround, and keep in mind you have, all you've picked up is 100 feet. You could, we had planned, and in our approved plans, we're showing a drop-off location here. So you have a drop-off location so people can come to the park, and then of course people can come across this road here and drop people off at the pedestrian promenade. So there are a couple of different drop-off locations here. You're only picking up, I think it said 8 or 13 parking spaces. So this is a very expensive, if it were to work, it would be very expensive. It may not work at all. This park shelter has the crusher fines. I believe it's either concrete or the crusher fines at the end of the field. I think this park shelter and restroom would be better placed over here, and I think you could accommodate a community garden on both sides as well, so you could have a community garden on both sides of the park and relocate this facility here and accommodate the runoff that was described. And part of it, there's a mapping, a delay with CDOT that I described earlier, and I believe that the consultants don't have this is not the latest mapping from CDOT, but right along here is the top of the berm, and this is where CDOT's trail is. So this trail is redundant, and there's a berm that starts coming up over here. So if you remove this trail and connect up this trail over here, then you'll have the CDOT trail coming across like this, and you wouldn't need a redundant trail. And so you would have the runoff areas on the east and the west side of the field. This play area is 200 feet by almost 100 feet in the middle. So it's a really, really significant play area that you could reduce that play area significantly, reduce visual impacts, add some natural seating or something like that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities here. And I'd love the opportunity to engage. This has been a town process, and we completely appreciate that and the process and everyone's involvement. If you'd like us to engage at this stage or some stage, we'd be happy to, and I could bring my engineer and landscape architect, and we could brainstorm together on some of these solutions. If you were to come up with a list of solutions and wanted that to happen, we'd be happy to do that.
Randy, before you leave that, would you reiterate again, do you remove the whole drop-off
Yes.
thing, and all the drop-off takes place at the promenade?
The drop-off would occur along Marshall Road
Okay.
and over here.
Would you inset Marshall Road so you have a inset drop-off?
That's what we've shown on I believe that's on the approved PD.
Okay. And then seating, spectator seating.
A couple of points there. This is to accommodate the field. This will be a downslope. I think if it's properly landscaped, if there's boulders, there'll be opportunity for people to spread out along here, from 400 feet wide to accommodate seating. Of Of course, we would hope that we want, again, as Trustee Hansen said, we'd like as big of a field as possible. We'd like to accommodate as many sport teams and have as high utilization as possible, so we can get some pub/restaurant to have a 2-story facility here with a 2nd-story deck overlooking the fields. The bigger the fields are, the more that would provide the opportunity for that business to do that. And then you'd have seating where you could have food and drinks as well. And then over here, I really appreciate the comments with the boulders. I love the use of boulders, and I think properly placed, whether it's boulders or whether they're large sandstone, properly cornered and put in certain locations, I think you can accommodate a very natural environment for seating on all sides.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Can we do that?
Sure.
So, pardon me for being behind again, but the, where you mentioned the pub, I thought that in the initial plans, more of that or all of that was commercial. I didn't, it was a surprise to me to hear that was res except for one little pub in the middle of it. Is that true? Have I misinterpreted?
Well, it's just a matter of size. I think we accommodated a 10,000-foot restaurant on that parcel.
And
the rest of it's res?
And the rest is residential, yes.
I'm going to piggyback on her comment. I'm just confused as to why it's only just one restaurant. I mean, why wouldn't you want a whole slew of restaurants there?
If we have the demand, we'll definitely come back to the board. Our goal is to have a focus around the town square and on Main Street, and it's not likely with the amount of homes that we have and that Superior and Louisville have that we can have 2 areas that have that sort of intensity. So we're focusing on Main Street and the town square for the restaurants and coffee shops, bakeries, entertainment that we talked about.
And that makes sense to me. But I just don't know where it came from with just the one pub. It just seems random, I guess.
And the fact that we're building a field to support one pub, not a set of commercial.
Just since that slides up, so in terms of parking, you said that well, I'll reserve comments, but that you would get rid of that area there. So the people presumably could park within the town center, correct?
That's what we would hope for as well. Right approximately at the bottom of the screen where the little hand is, that's the back of the town square where we'll have the largest structure in the community will be in that location. So at least probably 600 spaces.
Okay, that's what I remember.
And that's the hope, is that they would come into the town square and then walk along the pedestrian promenade over to the fields, perhaps along Marshall Road. The town square spans from Marshall Road to the promenade, and then come back and stop off at a coffee shop or a wine store or bakery, whatever, yogurt.
Thank you for confirming what I thought was the case.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry.
Shall I
yes, please.
to comment on the other 2 parks? Here, we also, we're really counting on the opportunity to engage with your staff and the consultants. We have presented different options. We can, there are a lot of options, and these are 2 nice options. It's probably not surprising we prefer our options, but we're flexible. We want to work with the town, and we want to come up with the best parks that we can. In that regard, I think of parks and sidewalks and streets at a pedestrian viewpoint. And I go through so many parks, and if you think about it, you go to so many places and you start to see patterns and things that just don't make sense. And then I kind of stop and I imagine looking down on some of these places, and I think they looked really great, a plan view, looking down. And we really have to put ourselves in the mindset of the pedestrian. And does the pedestrian know where they're expected to go? Where are they expected to recreate? Is it simple and yet elegant? And as it relates to the Village Green, we have we have a sidewalk along the street on all four sides, and then we have the interior sidewalk, then we have the 6 connecting sidewalks. And I think it's a lot of concrete that we don't need to have, and I'd love the opportunity to, at a much smaller scale, which would be a bigger image, to be able to engage with your consultants and share some of our goals. These are the two parks that we have that we're going to come to a real mutual consensus, and I know and believe that will happen. I'd like to engage with your professionals and come back to you with a plan that is a consensus. On the Central Park, we can move uses around. I didn't hear it as much tonight, but I heard previously some concern, Pam shared some concern about having the basketball court too close to the cemetery. We can do a profile and show how far down it's set from the cemetery. And sometimes, when you're looking here, a mere inch is 100 feet. And so you get a sense, you can look at something and think it's too close or think it's too small or too big, and we lose sight of that relativity. So I think it's hard to redesign these 2 parks now. So particularly I'd love the opportunity to work with whoever you designate us to work with, your staff and your consultant, to come up with a compromise plan. I would like to see, from our perspective, we are trying to represent who we think the future residents will be, who are going to be living in smaller homes than the average home. I mean, the goal of Superior Town Center was to provide a different, smaller housing supply, size of housing, than exists in Superior, and to not compete with that predominant stock of homes that are 2,500 to 10,000 feet. And all of our homes will be under 2,500 square feet, and they'll have smaller yards and things like that. So I think from that perspective, those home buyers and your future residents and voters will use the parks more than you think, and that's where we'd love the opportunity to find some happy medium and put some more courts in, all the different courts that we've shown. And of course, we'd love, Trustee Pennington mentioned having a dog park in every park. In our communities, every one of our parks has a dog. Maybe the nomenclature's off because they're not all more than 1.5 acres or something like that, but every park that we have, no matter how small, has a small fenced-in area or a fenced-in off-leash area, and dogs are fine. I can show you parks that I built, dog parks that I built on slopes, 3-to-1 slopes. Dogs never complain. And the dogs have had no problem with those slopes. Your staff has visited those parks as well.
Okay.
So,
Trustee Williams and Trustee Cookers.
So one of the things I'm definitely not going to support is any kind of recreation around the cemetery. I feel that needs the respect that it deserves, being a cemetery. I can't imagine playing volleyball or basketball right next to a cemetery.
What's a distance? What's a distance that you think would be acceptable?
I don't know the distance.
Some kind
but
of...
I will not support any kind of recreation around it. So if we work on what the distance is and what feels right, then, I'm fine with that. But if we're going to put a basketball court literally 50 feet next to it, I'm not going to support that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, the section where at other iterations were tennis courts, basketball courts, up to this little corner here. I'm sorry, I have a pointer that I can just point. This area here, what's the latest on this?
The latest on this is the present. It's what goes there.
What goes there?
Right. So there are at least there's 2 options that we've discussed. The existing plan brings the detention pond to the edge very close to the edge of the street. From the sidewalk down, we have a slope proceeding down to the detention pond in this location here. That's one option that we've evaluated. Another option that we've presented is the option to put in, is to narrow this street by 4 feet and to put in a double road parking lot with perpendicular parking, nose-in parking, with a drive down the middle and a hammerhead turnaround on the end here, and a trail connecting up. And by doing this, we increase the off-street parking, or we increase the parking in this area by 23 spaces. So that's one option. That's a more expensive option because it would require a greater use of walls. But of course, in this, as it relates to Central Park, we pay, in addition to the $10 million that we've set aside for the town's discretion for the parks and recreation, we pay 80%. We would pay 80% of the cost of Central Park. So you get a lot of bang for your buck.
So I'm a little concerned, this here is supposed to be a parking lot and/or a parking structure, correct?
It is as well.
Okay. And I'm just concerned that we've taken more of this land that we had and turning it into concrete. So I would not be in favor of that. I would.
And that's set, in that location, by the time you get here, the parking lot is over 10 feet below the elevation of the sidewalk. The road is rising at 5%, and this, the reason we have, actually, we have the entrance about right over here in the corner of the parking lot. This is dropping at 5%.
Well, so I'm just thinking of usable space here for the park, and I'm just feeling that we're kind of narrowing it, that we're taking some of the park away and using parking or whatever. So I would like to see us utilize as much space as possible here, if we can.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. As far as the cemetery is concerned, I think the distance, to me, in terms of respect, if you're visiting a cemetery, to me the distance would be, if I'm hearing a basketball bounce up and down, it's too close. If I'm not hearing any basketball, then it's fine. That's how I determine it. So I definitely would want to see more tennis courts. I think we need more tennis courts. They're packed. They would get good use out of them. And a question to you, Parcel 5, do you have any comments about Parcel 5? Basically, ProStack brought it up as if it's not usable, basically, just leave it as open space, or do you have any recommendations on their thoughts on Parcel 5?
I support their thoughts, and I think one of the things that was lost a little bit in their presentation was my recollection of the early dialogue here was that the Anderson parcel here is going to be developed at some point in the future, and they will also have an open space requirement. And so we set aside this corner here with the expectation that with the future planning with Anderson, that you would also get more open space and you'd be able to have a larger contiguous area right next to a road that you could plan something with. What's unknown is that road going to continue on over to 88th, or is it going to go down to Cold Creek? And when that's designed, you'll have the ability to put a road and take their open space, combine it with this open space, and you'll have a larger size park than you would otherwise be able to obtain. The berm, just commenting on the berm, I apologize for interrupting.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
Commenting on the berm, this area, we have the ability to fill it. Whatever the plan is, we have dirt, we have plenty of dirt, we're moving a lot of dirt. It's easy to raise that. That pond will remain a pond, but it's not part of our stormwater detention system.
Would it be possible to put a community garden in that place? Or is it too far away from everyone?
The community gardens, well, from my perspective, I see community gardens being much more effective. They're near a lot of people where people could walk to
That's
them.
what I thought, yeah.
And the homes on the southern portion, as you get farther away from the town center, the homes will get progressively larger.
And one last comment, I think for parcel 2, we definitely need to figure out a way to accommodate people are going to be watching their friends and loved ones play. So I'm not sure if bleachers is the right way to go, but we definitely need to have something in, not just at the pub. I mean, I'm sure they're, we have got to find some place to accommodate them.
Yeah. And one other comment that I should have made earlier, the floodplain continues along here, so this building, I believe, is in the floodplain, and I'm not sure where our plumber will be able to pull that out. And your consultants probably didn't have, that, there's only so much they can do. And so that's where I think if you bring the building up here, it'll be out of the floodplain.
Thank you.
Randy, I have one more question for you on parcel 3, if we can go to that. So how are we incorporating, and this is also to green play here, how are we, or design concepts, I'm sorry, incorporating the campus drive?
Campus Drive, we've, on the PD, the Campus Drive connection has been relocated over here to be parallel to the new pedestrian bridge that's part of the CDOT multipurpose pathway. And so, again, with the evolution of our planning and your consultants need a base to start working from, this base doesn't show that.
Okay. And I just wanted to reiterate to you, and I know I said this many moons ago, that for me, Campus Drive is one of the most important connections to the town center. And it was nice that we put Discovery Park in there, a connection, but for me, Campus Drive was the most important. And so I just want to let you know that, and that's something I'm going to be continually asking just to make sure that we're incorporating that into our plan. Thanks.
Just a quick question. Can you go back to parcel 2, and you mentioned the floodplain. Can you drag the cursor along where the floodplain actually goes? Where's the edge of the floodplain?
So we're processing a letter of map revision to revise the floodplain. Our expectation is that the floodplain will be revised somewhere along here.
Okay.
And I don't have the exact, I could provide an exhibit, I don't have it with me.
That's okay.
That's generally the location. So the floodplain would just pick up the, sort of the edges of the field is our expectation.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we did map the, when the high water mark was declared in this area, we had our, a surveyor go out within 24 hours and stake the high water mark. And across the board here, the high water mark was inside the 100-year floodplain, or in some cases significantly inside the 100-year floodplain. And in a lot of cases, it was it was shockingly close.
So I'm going to make a few comments, and I know, Trustee Pennington, you have some, but I'm just going to go from parcel to parcel. So for parcel 1, I don't think that it's a detention pond, not a retention pond, so that it serves a purpose. And so we would, if we wanted to actually have water in there and take volume out, we'd have to increase the equal amount of volume to replace that for the detention purposes of that. And so that would take out, you'd either make it deeper, presumably, or increase the surface area. So that is somewhat problematic to me. I can't really see why we would need that amount of parking there, but perhaps I'm missing that. In terms of the bigger scheme, though, I'm going to completely reserve judgment about if that's going to be a field or not. I have seen drawings where that might be community space, indoor community space, and that might make sense. I don't know when we would have to make that decision. The other opportunities would be for additional courts, because in my opinion, we need at least another basketball court and probably need 4 to 6 tennis courts that I can't see in this current diagram. So that might be a place that you could do that and add another dog park potentially. So I'm completely reserving judgment about that one area. In terms of Area 2, I think taking the parking lot, or the parking out completely would be fine. If we need a drop-off area, fine. I'd certainly take out the play structures, because I don't think kids would be really walking all the way across the field to get to a play structure. Maybe something small, but that's a gigantic area. The building, is that the right location? I don't know. Moving it out of the floodplain is obviously going to be needed, since we're not going to be building any permanent structures within the floodplain. Lights, I think we could decide at a different time. I think we have to stick with natural turf right now, because we don't know what the performance of these other turf products are like, so I think it's too soon to make a determination one way or the other about that, but that could be coming at a different time. So then going to 3 and 4, if I could. Once again, I'd take out the ping pong and the bocce ball, because I don't think anybody uses that. In terms of the cemetery, I think people are potentially overthinking this. This is a historic cemetery that nobody visits except for on History Day, once a year. I don't think anybody's going to visit loved ones, at least very few. So I'm less concerned about that, honestly. And actually, if people were there and actually wanted to go visit that, I think that would be fantastic. So I think having more activity there would be better. On one of your slides last presentation, there was a Frisbee golf area. I see no reason not to put that there. One, because it's just going to be open space because nobody's going to use it, but perhaps you need to show that to somebody, but that's just going to be open space 99% out of the time. I think you also presented putting the playground equipment closer to the pre-K BVSD site. I think that makes a lot of sense, as opposed to having them walk across a block to go to some other place. And finally, in terms of the dog park, we need more dog parks. I see no downside of putting it there. So
Putting
I
it
think
where?
where it was presented at the last meeting, on the slope area, so,
I thought you meant that little village green. I'm like, oh.
No, just where it was presented before. So, just my thoughts. So, I don't know how to address all that or what the process would be to do that, but once again, I appreciate everybody's work on this, but I don't think that this accommodates the adult activity that is required for a project like this. So, that's my thoughts.
Would you say a little bit, what kind of adult activity, does any come to mind for you?
Tennis.
Tennis?
Tennis and basketball would be in indoor community space. I mean, basically, if we go with this route, we have committed that our indoor space is going to be on the town court, or town center.
Is that
So,
a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's really limits your opportunities, and I think we're going to need more than what's actually identified in the town square. So just so people are aware of what we're doing here. So.
And I'm just going to say that, just really quick, I went out, the first thing I had on here was that we're lacking a rec center or indoor space, and that's, I would have, and I was glad that you raised it, because to me that was really important. But I wouldn't count either 5 or that spot as just open space. I'm happy to have open space that's unprogrammed,
Me too.
undeveloped. So to me, it doesn't seem like just, it's open space, which is a plus. So unprogrammed, whatever. And I agreed with almost all your other comments about, I would be very happy to see that parking go away, because I want to force the building of a structure that cannot be only 2 stories. It has to be more than 2 stories, or else we're just, so
Of a
of a parking structure. We have to have a parking structure sooner rather than later. And so if that helps make that happen, I'm all for it. So I like your idea of...
So from my perspective, it's not, I had no idea that I would be forcing anything. It's just good public policy to put parking where parking should go. So you raised your finger.
The comment came about the lighting for the fields, and I just wanted to reiterate something that came up during the approval process, is that if you chose to have these fields lighted, we would support that completely. I've built parks, lighted parks. I've disclosed to the homeowners before they buy that they're lighted parks and lighted fields and haven't had any problems, because they're not lit all night. They're lit till about 10 o'clock, the latest usually. And so to the extent that the board, you decide that you want those to be lighted fields, we'll accommodate that. And as far as pole locations and things like that, we can work that out. Thank you.
And I also want many dog areas.
So Randy, I need you up there to navigate back to parcels 1 and 2, if you would, please. I actually think a lot of great ideas have come forth tonight. So, Andrew, if I'm interpreting you correctly, in all probability, that's going to remain a detention pond that is empty a lot of the time, right? And I thought Randy brought up a great point that if that's the case, then the plaza with the overlook is unnecessary, which allows a little more berming there and a little more amphitheater space and whatnot. So, you know, that's my takeaway, is then to explore that. And if it allows more green space down below, that's great, to maximize the green space. And then, frankly, the field can be marked, because it'll be informally marked with chalk, right? In whatever way maximizes whatever, if in fact a field goes there. I'm listening to what the mayor said, is maybe that is a place for more tennis courts as well down there. I mean, I don't think we're sure on some of this stuff, so I'd like to keep that possibility open as well. Going down to where you said maybe dog garden, I'm going to use dog gardens because I like the size of dog gardens. I like as many dog gardens as possible, because I actually think this population has more per capita than other populations. So I think having them scattered around town makes sense. And I actually would like you and Design Concepts and Green Play to get your heads together before the next meeting and say, if we did 5 dog gardens or whatever is reasonable, where could we intersperse them and not make any one too large, but accommodate the needs of your proposed population? I am concerned about throwing in community gardens, just to say we've got community gardens. I was listening to Sharon Tedeschi-Osak, chairman, say they've repurposed some tennis courts over there and have 30 community gardens, and they've got this big old waiting list, and it's not enough. And so I believe that's a need that we can reserve for another part of town in which we do community gardens upright. So I don't feel a real compulsion to have to solve that community garden need in this area. I really did like Chris's idea not to mark the field in 2 with any boundary. If it's all done in grass that naturally flows, again, that can be marked with chalk lines. However, it needs to be marked, depending on the size of the game that's being played there. I have to agree, I'm a natural grass type of person there. The reason for that is I want the continuous vista down to the creek of green. So of natural green. So when a game's not being played, you know, if I want to go run on it, flying a kite or whatnot. So that's just my bias. Playground, I think people have weighed in that if we need that at all, depending on the proposed population of small children that may or may not be in Superior Town Center, I wouldn't even have it in that same position there. I would get rid of your parking circle there. I would minimize the toilet. I really dislike toilets being in good vantage points. Let's put them somewhere less visible and maybe actually put a small playground over there if one even needs to be there. And I don't necessarily think it does need to be there. Anyway, if you go down to the I actually think the cemetery is going to become more prominent in this community. The cemetery has been sort of a weird thing just because it was inaccessible. And I think it's going to come into prominence here, it's going to have to. I mean, it's going to be more prominent than it's ever been. And so I do think we need to have a healthy discussion on how close is too close, and, right, we're not burying any new bodies there. These are...
For the last 100 years.
This is historic bodies, so I do believe we need to show respect. I mean, because, you need to show respect there. But what those boundaries are, I need to go out and walk it again. And it's amazing when you walk these things seem to clarify. Agree that the bocce ball and the ping pong table that area is ripe for repurposing there. I do love the idea that hasn't been mentioned yet about using that slope for some natural boulder type of activity. I think the kids will love it. I think they'll gravitate to that. I hope we can maybe do the sled run. I hope that still survives. And, so if you get rid of bocce and you get rid of that parking, and I'm the queen of parking here, so I don't get rid of any parking lightly, but if we can fit a couple more tennis courts there and everybody's in agreement, I think that needs to be explored some more. Let's see. But what I'm excited about, in terms of indoor space, I just cannot see a facility being built affordably in any of these places that we've seen tonight. And so I think the logical place for all kinds of reasons is in the town square area. The reason why is I really want the members of this community to be crossing that town square time and time and time and time again and make it Main Street. That's what we want. We want activity constantly. If you're going to the library, you're going to work out, if you're going to pay your utility bill, going to go meet with the manager or whatnot, I do see that as just a focus. So I'm not looking for indoor space to go in any of these park areas. It doesn't have to be above the town square, but to be in the main core there, that's where I see wanting to deliberately draw people. But I'm happy with the basic bones I see because there are some nice destinations here. So we have a concert and you go out and have this amphitheater-esque type thing, or you've got a big sporting event along Coal Creek, you got that, or you've got Historical Commission Day and you're at the cemetery. We've got some places, I'd go just to see these places, and I think that's sort of the purpose here. But definitely, by next meeting, we need to have a little bit of closure on these dog gardens.
Just a very quick comment. So if you're the queen of parking, I'll tell you I'm the king of restrooms. So I'm...
You want it visible?
No, I'm thinking of the purple park type restroom, which blends in so beautifully with the rest of the park. You don't even know it's there, but it's so necessary.
It's necessary,
yeah, but
not a focal point.
No, it's not a focal point, but it's necessary. You can't eliminate restrooms when you have so many people there.
I'm just relocating.
Keep the restrooms, that's all I'm saying.
Anything else from the board? So, town manager, you have idea of what you're going to do now?
Well, as far as the immediate term, for the 14th, the only thing that was included in the 14th final development plan proposal was parcel 4 in the dog park. So I don't know how the board wants to proceed. If you want to give direction with regard to parcel 4 in the dog park, or...
I don't think we want to give direction necessarily. I think that there were some options that were going to be explored, but we need to figure out between tonight and the next meeting where dog parks would go so that we don't remove them unnecessarily, and where additional court space would go.
And
whether or not it's there or some other place. So.
And I also would need some clarification in the documents about just how this is all going to be paid also, because there was a change in my understanding of how things were going to be paid last time, so I needed to be really clear who's paying what, whether things are coming out of the 10 million. I did not think they were coming out of the 10 million, and that really changes how I feel about it, so, thanks. So just make it clear in our documents.
Gotcha. So right now, the final development plan that you would see on the 14th wouldn't include any amenities in parcel 3. We could provide clarification if amenities do get built, how that gets paid for, so we can do that for sure. Are you looking for a proposal to come forward?
Not looking for a
Okay.
proposal, I just want to make sure that
Things happen.
theoretical space is provided somewhere within the town center for the things that the board has talked about to make sure that they're available.
If I might make a suggestion, I actually think it's wise for the proposal that comes before us next week to have no amenities in parcel 4 either. I do believe that there's the opportunity here for ProStack and their subcontractors and the developer to sit down to see if maybe there's a compromise that both would suggest. I'm not looking for heavy-handedness there. If ProStack continues to say, nope, we like ours, and the developer continues to say they like theirs, then it has to come before the board to play arbiter. But this is how I believe the process should play out. Now, we've seen this, and it goes back to a neutral forum to come up with what's best for the town. And so for 4 to come forward, as the developer proposed it last time, without any changes and ignoring what we've seen tonight on 4 doesn't seem to me to be advisable. And likewise, we can't just superimpose tonight's plan there and say, no, this is it, because we have committed on parcel 4 to have a town and developer process. So, if we want the speediest resolution, it would seem to me we should say this will be a green space. This will be largely a green space. We agree on that. It's called the Village Green. And leave the detail for another time. And I think then that meeting can be very smooth and problem-free, and the amenities in parcel 4 can be hammered out in a forum that's much better suited for that. That's my idea.
Trustee Skumats.
And I don't know what the next process should be, but I might not have said, if I had spent however many months as ProStack and did what we asked for, which was gave us a proposal, I might want an end to that process and say, we gave you our proposal, we met what you asked for.
And I think that's fair, if that's what they wish to do.
Or if that's what we wish them to do.
Sure.
I mean, so at some point, it is our decision, it becomes our decision. I'm happy to have that happen in a clearer and sooner way than keep sending things back and keep sending things back. Ultimately, we've gotten advice from, a couple of folks.
Sure.
At some point, it becomes our decision. I'd rather have that happen sooner than later.
Right.
So, anyway,
Yeah.
rather than people feel like they're spinning their
I
wheels.
think that's totally legitimate. I just happen to think there's one more iteration that can make everybody happy. I'm not interested in 10 more. But I would ask, actually, the ProStack chairman to comment on, are you done? Is this it? Are you gonna, are you over and done, or are you?
No,
are you
I
interested?
really have enjoyed this discussion this evening, and it just shows you the kinds of discussions we've been having over the last 8 months. I mean, it's like, as the mayor said, it's very much of a balance between competing interests. Randy certainly came up and demonstrated his expertise tonight and offered wonderful commentary, as so many people did, talking about the various opportunity areas that we have left, the things that we've decided that we need and we may need to find spaces for. So I'd be more than happy, even if it's not even a task process, to try to have a meeting with the committee, our consultants, the developer, just to sit down and just talk about those specific options on those parcels, if it can help, help the process along. I think the more talking we do and getting everybody together, the more chances we have that we can come up with something great, as we've even worked on some great ideas this evening.
Okay.
And OSAC.
Can I just say that OSAC would want to be a part of that, especially around parcels 1?
I will say that OSAC wants to be part of that process for the, for the record.
Yes.
Can I say one more thing? I think this discussion would be a little empty if I didn't mention that the pool is a major issue that has come up consistently from a number of people. It continued to come up. We weren't really able to find the place for the pool here, but there is a lot of strong feelings that there will need to be a pool somewhere in the northern part of town. It doesn't necessarily maybe have to be in this development, but a pool is one of those major things that we really need to also think about for the future.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask the developer about comments, the most recent comments about getting together and hammering out some ideas between you and the committees?
Yes, thank you, Randy Goodsmith, RC Superior. I support all the comments except for one regarding parcel 4. I think if you look at the uses, I believe strongly, if you look at the uses between our proposal and the ProStack proposal, the only difference is that we've added a tot lot play area. The design, design is design, but if we go to the fundamental uses of parks and have we accommodated the uses, our plan, which I'm sure I know Lisa could bring it up if you'd like to look at it, but our plan puts the tot lot play area here, catty corner to the preschool, the Early Childhood Education Center, and puts the pavilion over here. And we don't have this internal sort of duplicative concrete loop. Ours might not look so pretty at plan view, but I believe when you think about standing on a corner as you enter the park, you'll know how to get to where you're going. We maximize the green space. We maximize the open grass area. We put barriers on the ends, berms with shrubs to prevent, first of all, to obstruct a vehicle if it doesn't make the turn or reads the text at the wrong time, to obscure the lights, the headlights of vehicles when they're driving down either end of these roads so that they don't disrupt the enjoyment of the people in the park. We have a bicycle parking over here and over here. There's a few nuances that, where we have something that's not here, but there's nothing on this plan that we don't have in our plan. And so just the design is a little bit different. So, my hope would be that you would take away from the ProStack recommendation. I don't think ProStack expected you, and I won't speak for them, but you could ask them. I don't think they expected you to take these plans and stamp them for construction. I think they're informative, and for all of the other plans, happy to engage in the dialogue as you direct. For the direction here, I'd be less happy to string that process along. I think the FDP2, we would like to have it approved, and at the same time, I don't want to make it seem like I'm not taking into consideration or adjusting our plans, and that's why I wanted to just explain. I think everything that's in this plan, I know for certain, I believe, is in our plan, and if it's not, somebody could point it out, maybe we could add something to the plan that we have. So I'd really hope that you'd take that into consideration. We'd like not to delay the FDP2 and to pull this out. We need some level of certainty for what's going to be in the parks. I don't want to make
the
this a dispute.
The question is, between now and July 14th, when we review that, are you interested in sitting down with Design Concepts and ProStack to see if you guys can reach a happy medium, or are you really interested, are you telling us tonight that you wish to stay with your full parcel for the way it was presented previously?
Well, as I started, the very first thing I mentioned is I'm eager to sit down with whoever you direct, ProStack, their consultants, staff. I'm eager to do that. I know from just my experience, it's here and in other places, it's an iterative process. I'm not sure how much could be accomplished between now and July 14th, and I was really responding to the comment that perhaps Park 4 be pulled out of the pending FDP, and I really hope that that's not the case. But I'm happy to meet with them tomorrow if they're able to pull their committee together and the consultants.
Trustee Skumatz.
So I guess one of my questions is when when that FDP comes forward, we can't like design on the fly on those things, that sort of thing. So I have no idea if it's legal or appropriate for us to, everybody's busy, but to have like a work session on this, whatever, it would be the 7th or something like that, can we do this in a work session process? Can we have the, presentation of, the
Public hearing.
variations around the theme or whatever comes out of that next thing, and we say, hey, this is what we're more interested in than not, so that when the FDP comes forward, the elements that need to be nailed down can be nailed down, and those that don't can't. But
We'd have to ask the attorney, but I think that might be problematic given that we're in the middle of a public hearing.
But during the evening of the public hearing, can we see a couple of iterations?
And start early.
of course, 14th. Something happened.
Okay.
The applicant's nodding in support.
Yeah, so that's excellent. So thank you, everybody, for the conversation. I think that we're coming up with a really good plan. Once again, thank you to ProStack, OSAC, thank you to the developer, thank you to the consultants, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to not entirely wrap this up, but get the big majority of this done in the hopefully not too distant future. So, all right, thank you very much. I'll have to excuse everybody since we're now going on to an executive session, so I'll give a couple of minutes.
It's getting hot here. Andrew?
Yes, ma'am.
Send this down. There's a couple of pages you need to initial.
Okay.
Because they've deleted some stuff out of that contract.
Happy to.
That was fine. No, it was good.
Just initial.
Just initial those pages, yeah, where they got it deleted. There's two on that one page. Did you see that little?
No.
My little makeshift tag.
Oh, okay.
They got some a line crossed out.
I think that went pretty well.
Thank you.
Want it? This one right here.
I'm assuming we're off.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't sign that one.
Let's keep it short.
Sign that one.